I think the thing I'm most curious about when I think about Michigan's defense against Texas's offense is how much Wink Martindale is going to blitz Quinn Ewers.
Yeah. Quinn Ewers' very first throw of that Colorado State game was like a tight window, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like right in a guy's numbers. And he just looked pretty unbothered most of the game. And it's just one of those, if he's an unbothered tight window veteran quarterback now, then sometimes you can have great coverage and a guy like that still makes a play. And it's like he's keeping Arch Manning on the bench. And I have gone back and forth at times about like what Quinn Ewers is and isn't. I thought that was that was a very grown up performance, I thought, in week one. Yeah. And that anybody, this is Michigan has one of the best defenses in the country. Like anybody watching that, I thought it was like, okay, like this is going to be tough to deal with this guy because I don't think we're going to shake him. So I do think the Texas passing game is, but if you're going to have that, I mean, like, give me Will Johnson to start with, right? I mean, like that's a good way to start with pass defense. But I think Quinn Ewers has a chance to have a big game.
Yeah.
All right, other side of the ball, Michigan offense versus Texas defense, and let's talk about running it first of all. Texas lost 2 defensive tackles who were among the best defensive tackles in the country last year. One to the first round of the draft, one to the second round of the draft. They're playing guys now who are like veteran guys who have been around, which kind of means they weren't quite good enough to beat out the guys who were there before, and they stuck around and they've played 49 career games and they've made some starts and that kind of thing. But I think you can see the drop off, right? And that's me being less of a hardcore ball guy than you, that I think Michigan has an opportunity there. Now, I do think it felt like the Texas linebackers got downhill against Colorado State. I actually thought Colorado State ran the ball okay at times, and I think they averaged 3.7 yards per carry, so it's not like they were all over the place. But Anthony Hill Jr. and David Benda at linebacker, both, like Hill especially, he's a young guy. I think he was a freshman All-American last year. They talk about him as a future star. I mean, the future might be here. He's going to be chasing guys down, and I think they're going to be downhill because I don't know that anybody is scared of the Michigan passing game right now. So I think their linebackers are going to be downhill in holes. And the Michigan offensive line, they admit they didn't play great last week. I know Josh Priebe has talked this week, and they all say they got to play better. They're working on, I think this week in practice, not moving guys in and out as much, just playing the same group of 5. They lost so much. I mean, they basically lost their entire offensive line from last year. And one of the things, Bill, is they've had excellent center play. You and I were in love with Oluwatimi a couple years ago, and Drake Nugent last year was really good. They hit twice in a row at center, and it's hard to keep doing that. So Texas, I think their defensive front, their interior is not as good, but I think Michigan up front, their interior is not as good. So yeah, I think Michigan has to try. I do think you might be able to run on Texas this year, but it has to be maximum Michigan. The offensive line has to play better. Khalil Mullings is probably going to get a lot of work here. We've talked about the idea that, you know, is he more of a hammer than Donovan Edwards is? Will he be a guy who they lean on for the rushing attack here? I think maybe in the past you would have said, I don't know if you can run on Texas. I think maybe you can, but Michigan has to run it better, and the offensive line has to play better than it did in week 1.
Yeah, it does feel to me a little bit like maybe Texas's defense has slipped from last year. It was like you couldn't really run on them because of what they had in the middle, but you could throw on them if you had time to do it. And now this year, maybe you can run on them a little bit, and they've kind of retooled the secondary in a way that might make them a little better pass defense-wise. But I was looking up just like some advanced stat stuff. I didn't want to like layer this preview with that, but I do think maybe these 2 numbers could be important. I don't want to rely on them too much because it was week 1. They were playing an overmatched opponent. Maybe they just weren't showing a whole lot and doing a whole lot. But Texas came out of week 1 defensively, ranked 76th in the country in rushing success rate and 93rd in the country in front 7 havoc rate. So there just wasn't a whole lot going on up front for them against Colorado State. And that could certainly just be the byproduct, like I said, of just keeping it pretty vanilla. I don't think they'll be vanilla against Michigan. But I think a lot of times when coaches kind of speak in the cliche of you make the biggest jump from week 1 to week 2, I think a lot of that has to do with offensive line play. So if Michigan's offensive
Mm.
line is going to
Yep.
put forth a better effort this week, like I could definitely see some opportunity there. I think you need a good Donovan Edwards game though. I think you need the Donovan Edwards who typically shows up in big games and gives you like an 80-yard touchdown run kind of out of nowhere. I don't think if Michigan gets the same effort that it got from Donovan Edwards last week that it can run the ball effectively enough to win this game. But maybe they do get a good version of Donovan Edwards.
Yeah, but I think they have to run it because I don't. Michigan can't throw to win. I don't think in this game, and I do agree with you
I
that I
don't think
think
so either.
everybody last year thought you could throw on Texas. You and I think both picked Washington to beat Texas last year in the semifinal because I think we both thought it was like the worst version of a matchup for Texas to go against Michael Penix and Roma Dunze in that passing attack because that was the weakness last year. But Jaden Barron is back. He had a pick in the opener. He was second team All SEC in the preseason. They have a couple other corner. I think they're better at corner. I think they have some decent safeties, and I agree with you. It's flipped. I think now the way to try to beat Texas is to try to run on Texas. So like that's what Michigan that fits Michigan, right? So like last year you would have wanted to be Washington against Texas. Now I think you want to be Michigan, but they have to throw it better. So the receivers were basically not involved in week one. Colston Loveland, the tight end, who's probably the best tight end in the country, had 8 catches on 9 targets. The receivers didn't do much. Tyler Morris had 3 catches. Samaj Morgan had 2. Like, the run game, they ran a jet sweep to Samaj Morgan on the first drive and that kind of thing. JJ McCarthy really was effective the last couple years in just being a guy who could make a couple plays a game. And last year in adjusted completion percentage on throws of 20 yards or more, JJ McCarthy was number 2 in the country behind the guy who won the Heisman. So JJ McCarthy only threw about 3 passes per game last year that were more than 20 yards down the field. But when he did, Michigan was really effective at that. Davis Warren was 0 of 3 on passes of 20 yards or more in game 1. So they have to have at least a little bit of the threat of that to open things up for the run game, and they don't yet. And I think they have to try. And so they know that, like, the receivers just have to be more impactful. It can't only be Colston Loveland. Davis Warren, 15 of 25 for 118 last week. Again, I don't think they're showing everything either. It's the first start for a guy. We get that. His average depth of target was like, okay. He threw a pick on a deep ball. Like, you understand that. And he played 53 plays, and Alex Orji only played 9. So I don't know. I certainly am not necessarily anticipating that, they were just holding Alex Orji and now he's going to play 20 or 30 snaps. I don't know. Maybe that will be a bigger package for them. But this is the greatest concern for me, is that I do think Texas's pass defense is better. And I just don't know about Michigan's ability to get the ball to anybody who's not Colston Loveland.
Yeah, Michigan's receivers against Fresno State were targeted 13 times, which is pretty low. 6 catches for 34 yards out of that position group. It's just not good enough. And Davis Warren, I think, probably missed a couple of throws. Alex Orji definitely missed at least one throw that I can remember. So maybe they can clean some of that stuff up, but it just doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't feel to me like a dangerous receiving group. And now it's also, I think, the strength as you laid out of Texas's defense. Texas also added Andrew Makuba, a safety from Clemson. I think is pretty good.
Really good. That's a great transfer addition. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't love the sort of the opportunities there to throw the ball for Michigan necessarily. I actually am wondering a little bit if there is more Alex Orji stuff. If there's some 11-man run packages where you have Alex Orji out there as a guy you have to account for. They can get pretty creative with that kind of stuff. Like, we saw it as a wrinkle be effective a couple of years ago against Ohio State. They put Alex Orji in and they ran for 20 yards. You're not surprising people anymore with Alex Orji, but if you can block it up and you got to account for all 11 people, it's difficult to defend. And as we've said, I don't think run defense necessarily is the strength of Texas's defense at the moment. So maybe there's something there. Maybe you get a really good Davis Warren game. I don't know. So it's or maybe the offensive line just takes takes a tangible step forward. I don't think Michigan is a lost cause in this game offensively. but it does feel like it's going to have to be like pretty high level execution, I think, for Michigan to score as much as it needs to score to win.
Our guy John in the YouTube comment says, I think it's pretty funny how last year it was Michigan carries JJ, he stinks. Now it's JJ was so good last year, Michigan can't win without an elite quarterback. It's crazy. I understand like feeling that. I did feel like that was a sentiment last year. Like I think in the moment, I don't know that I thought that was true. I thought JJ was exactly the type of quarterback who could make plays when you needed him to. And he did not carry the offense because he didn't have to carry the offense, but the NFL liked what they saw. And on third down, on a couple big shots per game in a way that really mattered, he really mattered. And the idea, like, again, that conversation was there for 2 years. Like, Cade McNamara, they need better quarterback play than that. It got him to the playoff in 21, but JJ needs to elevate it. I think maybe in 22, he elevated it a little bit. I thought in 23, like, I think the Ohio State game was an example of it. Like, just a couple throws a game that are elite throws. And Michigan's always going to be, I think, as you said, Sharon Moore, this is Jim Harbaugh DNA. They're always going to be a run-first team. You can see it with how they use personnel and line up and that kind of thing. But you have to have the threat of that enough to back people off a little bit. And that is what you have to, I mean, obviously, you're wondering about that right now when you have this quarterback situation. And if they can't do it, if they can't back them off and the linebackers get downhill and there's no threat with the receivers down the field, I think it could be a very long day for Michigan.
Yeah, I think it could as well. I do have like, there were just times last year, and like the personnel's different. I understand that, but like Michigan would just put out 7 offensive linemen, a couple of tight ends, create super wide rushing surfaces, and just kind of like dare you to be able to cover all of it, and then operate those run schemes with like expert efficiency and precision.
Yep.
And the idea of like, if you can get into that stuff, and then you have like Alex Orji as a runner to throw on top of it, like I can see that as a winning recipe for Michigan.
Okay.
I just don't know. I just don't know if their personnel, given that it's so new, is quite ready for that just yet.
All right. So let's go to our picks then. Bill Landis, what do you think is going to happen? This line was 3.5 before the season. After week 1, it moved as high as 7.5. Now what I'm seeing is down to 7. I think a lot of people is like, oh, now you're giving me like Michigan more than a touchdown. That becomes like a very appealing bet for people. And so I think the line has moved back a 0.5 point as a result. What's your pick for this?
Can I give you 2 things real quick before I give you my pick?
You can.
Texas was number 120 in the country last year in red zone touchdown percentage, which is like a statistical anomaly that it kind of makes no sense to me. They got to the playoff being that inefficient in the red zone. They were 7 of 7 against Colorado State, but I do think that's an area worth keeping an eye on because I don't think doing it that well against Colorado State means it's fixed. And then one other guy to mention, because we didn't really talk special teams. Dominic Zavada, Michigan's kicker, hit from 45, 53, and 55 last week against Fresno State. If it becomes a game where field goals matter, I can see him being a guy who maybe wins a game for Michigan. But I don't have Michigan winning. I have Texas winning 28-20. I just don't think there's enough for Michigan's offense to keep up. I don't think Texas's offense is going to go crazy on Michigan's defense because Michigan's defense, I think, is legitimately very good, especially in the front 7. I think they will give Texas, all it can handle. But there's enough explosive plays from Texas's offense to be the difference, and Michigan won't be able to respond in kind with its own offense. So a close game, I guess it's a cover, even with the expanded spread. But I have Texas 28-20.
And I have Texas 31-17. And again, I think this happens a lot where that's a 2-score game. It's a 1-score game and it's close and Michigan has an opportunity, but they can't quite take advantage in the second half. And now Texas, Michigan's trying to drive and they miss a 3rd down throw and they punt it back to Texas. Now Texas gets it back. Now they drive for a score to go ahead 14 with 7 minutes left, right? Now it's a 2-score game, but it's been a 1-score game for most of the game. I don't think Texas blows them off the field because I think the Michigan defense is too good for that. But a lot of this is just Quinn Ewers has been doing this and Davis Warren hasn't. And in a game like this, that is a huge edge. And I just think Quinn Ewers is not going to be rattled. And we did note that Quinn Ewers has addressed Michigan as the team up north, right? He has a little scooch of that Ohio State in him from his foray in Columbus for a year. And now he gets to go play in the big house, man.
Yeah, that's actually quite funny. And I think Ohio State fans will be cheering for Quinn Ewers this week.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things. But as Becky points out, we can hate both Michigan and the Southern schools. So again, like this is everybody, right? you got your rival, but let's just save a little bit of energy for the South. So again, I don't think Ohio State fans are going to root against Texas. Or, excuse me, are going to root for Michigan and against Texas in this game. We get that. It would be great. I'm not, but like everybody else in the North, root for Michigan, right? Come on. I get it. When it's your rival, you get an exemption, but everybody else should be hoping Michigan gets this done.